we have Dave McMurtrie and Dan Wood
Tough to remember.
interviewing a whole bunch of Amiga guys. So take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I hope you're having a wonderful second day at VCF East. My first time here. Just a quick intro as to who I am. I mean, I'm just a fan of the Amiga and Commodore in general. Grew up with the Commodore Plus/4, then Amiga 500, 1200 after that, CD32, CDTV. Grew up reading about these guys in magazines when I was a kid, and it's just incredible to be up here on stage, meeting some of my heroes and hearing their stories. I actually do a podcast called The Retro Hour that I've been doing now for 10 years, which if you haven't checked it out, you can get that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts as well, where we interview industry legends, so quite appropriate to be doing this today.
Absolutely. Dave McMurtrie. Likewise, I really love Commodore stuff, and I love learning about the history of the company. So I've been doing that for quite a few years, mid-'90s, and I started gathering internal documentation and talking to people like this to ask them questions, because the best way to learn is ask the people who did it. So if you want to follow my stuff, at Commodore.history on YouTube, or www.commodore.international is the website. That's everything. Jeff Porter, take it away.
Oh boy, Jeff Porter. So I'm. Oh boy, when did I? Yeah. So I started at Commodore in 1984. I guess I was 2 years old, and yeah, I'm really that old. And I came there to do. They said, well, you could do C64 stuff. You could do Unix workstations, okay, getting more interesting, or laptop computers. I said, okay, let's do a laptop computer. So I went to make a Commodore LCD, which later got canned because we threw all our eggs in the Amiga basket. And then I said, okay, I'm joining the party. So to make a long story short, I was the guy behind the 500. So next, Dale. You got a microphone up your butt.
Oh, I got my... Hello, is this on? Yeah. I'm Dale Luck. I started at Amiga in 1983 in August, and I was the second software person there. And I also brought some historical stuff that I had been stashing away, the breadboards that we probably showed at the Consumer Electronics Show in January of 1984, and also like some of our test stuff. And one of the Lorraine prototypes, I'm not sure if that's war or peace.
So each one of these prototypes is one of the Amiga custom chips in TTL.
Or high-speed CMOS.
Okay.
I think at one time we thought that we had bought almost all the high-speed CMOS west of the Mississippi to do this, because we had two sets of these. Of all these three stacks. So the biggest one is Agnes. That's the address generator, the main blitter, and it has all the address pointers and minterms and things like that. It controls the DMA. And then we have Daphne, or Denise at this time, and that's the display generator and the sprites. And then Paula, or Portia was what it was known back in that day, and that's the port chip. Portia was for the ports. And the floppy disk, and that's Glenn Keller's design. If he's up here, but he can talk more about that. First time I've been here at VCF East, and there's a big, and this is a 40th celebration, and we're going to have a 40th celebration in the West Coast, and so hopefully a lot of you guys can swing out there, because we have
Dale's from the West Coast.
Yeah, we have more stuff to. This is just some of the stuff that I brought. We have more stuff we're gonna be showing out there at the VCF West in August. Okay.
A quick thing to mention real quick, Andy, before we get to you is Amiga was actually founded before Commodore bought them. So for the people in the audience who don't know that, Commodore didn't buy them until 1985. So Dale mentioned he worked 84. Dale worked there in 83. So he was with the original company before Commodore got involved.
So I usually I say BC, which is before Commodore, and AC, which is after Commodore. So this is BC. This is all BC stuff. And But it was a good merge.
I'm the AC.
I'm Andy Finkel. I started at Commodore in 1981. I worked on the VIC-20, the Commodore 64, the Plus 4, the LCD machine, and then the Amiga stuff, the A500, the A1000, the A1200, and CDTV, you know, pretty much everything. So I've been around there forever. I just followed Commodore
Right to the grave.
well, almost to the grave. At the end, I kind of jumped ship and went to NTG for a while, and then 3DO.
And then you sort of exceeded the grave because Commodore hired you back as a consultant even after they were bankrupt.
Yeah, that was a short-term thing. I put together took the Amiga stuff from the Sun tapes and made the packages that got distributed to all the companies that bought Commodore.
So, hi everyone. I'm Peter Cherna. I started at Commodore in May of '89. I worked there until September-ish of '93. I was brought in and I worked on the software team. Andy was my boss, and I worked on preferences stuff. I worked on the gadget toolkit. That was my creation. I did a lot of work on the 2.0 New Look and the AA support, AGA support in 2.0 and 3.0, and I did a little bit of work on the CD32. I did work on the language screen and on the CD player software for the CD32. And yeah, we'll see where we go today. Looking forward to meeting, talking, answering questions.
Hi, I'm Randell Jesup. I came into Commodore in '88 along with Bryce Nesbitt, hired by Andy here. I worked there till the very end, and the deathbed vigil was held at my house, as you've probably all seen. I worked on hard disk partitioning stuff. I worked on porting the Amiga OS from BCPL to C in assembler, and network stuff. Also, I did a whole bunch of hard disk driver stuff, SCSI drivers, ATA drivers. Worked on the CD32, the A600, A1200, you name it. Did the 4091 software. And I brought some more show and tell things. There's an A3000 Plus with working DSP, one of 3 ever made, though they've now recreated them. There's one of the original 040 cards from the 3000 launch, had static RAM cache on it, though we didn't show it at the launch. And the plot here is a plot of Mary, which Glenn will tell you more about in a second.
Hi, is this mic on? Yes. Hi, my name's Ron Nicholson. I'm the odd man out since I was here last year for the 40th anniversary of the Apple Macintosh, so I'm really an Apple person. I was never a Commodore person, but...
Ooh.
But one of the reasons I ended up at Amiga was that Jay Miner was working on a chip for Apple, and later he hired me out of Apple to found Amiga. I was actually the first engineer there. I started actually before Jay did. As to what I did in the project, I did just a few little things. Like, for instance, that's the first wire-wrapped CPU board at Amiga down there. I think that's when I hand wire-wrapped. The 3 boards there, I actually was not involved with. People like Glenn, Keller, and others were involved in the detailed design. All I did was fill 3 room-size whiteboards with the block diagram for the entire system, including the video, the DMA, the audio, et cetera, et cetera. So I played a small part in
Ron, you do have one distinction that you should mention between your Apple and your Amiga time. You got your name in the cases of both.
Ooh, that's true. Yeah. So I have my signature in the Macintosh case, just a little off to the side of Waz's, and I have my distinction in the Amiga case is it's a little above a dog print. Mitzi.
I'll just take this one. Or maybe. My name's Glenn Keller. I came in as a junior chip designer. For some reason, Jay liked me. I designed the audio chip, and then I was momentarily on cost reduction until I realized that Jeff Porter and Headley were so much better than that, that there was no point. They were way better. It was incredible. But, yeah, they were incredible. You know, when we combined with Commodore, I was just amazed by both the friendliness and the competence of the engineers there. Anyway, later on, I did some AAA chipset design. I worked on all 3 chips under a guy named Jim Redfield. And that's kind of the story, including that one right there.
You mentioned then about you know, working for Amiga before Commodore, and if Apple got a boo, I've got to fit on the word Atari. Might get an even bigger boo, but yeah, Atari nearly bought the Amiga. I mean, you know, for the OG guys, you know, for Dale, Ron, and Glenn. I mean, do you have any memories of that time and there's negotiations with Atari, and what was kind of the story there? Maybe one.
Use your microphone.
Oh, okay. I'm not the best person to talk about that because I was, you know, I was a young engineer and what I did was transistors.
RJ would tell the story the best.
RJ would tell the story well.
But, you know, as rumor has it, you know, Commodore walked in with the check at like the 11th hour and 59th minute.
That I remember.
And, you know, stole the company from the Atari bid that was about to close in the next 60 seconds.
Oh, that's right. We were, how can I forget that? We were about to run out of money, and the paycheck was about to not to get paid, and Commodore walked in with a reasonable offer at the last minute. And that was right at that transition where Tramiel
went to
suddenly
Atari.
Jumped over to Atari, and it was pretty confusing. I wasn't involved in any of the business thing. I just know that things were very fraught for a while.
So we had, you know, Commodore acquired these 3 gaming chips, and of course the gaming market was pretty much killed by a Commodore 64, and so you had to have a computer about it, so they needed to build it into something computer-ish that also played games, because that was sort of the hallmark of what Commodore did. And so the A1000 was the first version, and that was all done mostly on the West Coast, but a lot of the guys like Andy and the software guys from Westchester in Pennsylvania got hijacked to, you know, make sure that product got designed and out the door for version 1.
It was kind of a bait and switch. We thought we were getting a game machine, and we actually got a computer. When my group was first asked to evaluate the Amiga stuff, we were evaluating a 68,000 game machine, and you know, with I don't know, 64K of RAM, and you know, 64K of ROM, and just, you know, a very minimal thing. And we were looking at it as a, well, here's a game machine, here's a successor for the Commodore 64, and by the time we got out to Los Gatos, we found out that it was quite a bit more.
So I had to build a whole computer around it. And so there was a lot of work. And eventually by April 13th, 1985, is that the date? I think it is.
Me. Somewhere around.
At the Lincoln Center in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
August 13th? Okay. July, August timeframe?
During SIGGRAPH. It was right before SIGGRAPH.
Okay. So, you know, we've finally launched the A1000 in New York, and we had Bob Paraso give a really nice launch talk there. He headed the software group on the West Coast, and we had Deborah Harry and Andy Warhol do that famous picture that somebody has the original of.
Yeah, let me throw in a little more backstory about that.
I like went way through that fast, because, go ahead.
Because Commodore, you were really supposed to get a game machine, because it was Joe DeCure and I were brought together. And Joe DeCure's background, of course, is he did the chipset for the Atari VCS. and the 400, 800. So he knew how to do game machines really well. And so I was to join with him because Jay wanted to add a few more high-end features to a game machine, but it was really supposed to be a game machine optionally with high-end features. But then a certain company released a video game that sold so poorly that we had to pivot. I don't know if I should mention that.
E.T., yeah.
That was it, yes. So that changed, that caused us to pivot, and Jay was brilliant because he wanted to have a thing that could be both a game machine, a design that could be both a game machine and expandable to a computer, and we sort of left the game machine in there as we built it up into a full-fledged personal computer.
Jay told me he wanted to do a Singer Link flight simulator.
That's true. He and I both had seen flight simulators, and at that time they were boxes about the size of a delivery truck. And Jay said, "No, I can shrink that down to a single IC." It turned out it required 3 ICs, though.
Great. Awesome.
One quick question. Obviously, when the Amiga launched, the Boing Ball demo was legendary, and still is iconic today. I'm interested, Dale. I mean, what was kind of the backstory of Boing, and where did that come from, and what was the aim with that?
Well, I guess that's to me. The first Boing Ball demo came out in January 1984 CES, and but it didn't come out at the beginning of the show. It came out on the very last day of the show. We had lots of demos that we showed the Amiga capabilities, including audio and fast area fill and stuff like that to show the colors and things. But one of the demos that was shown was a demo that Sam Dicker wrote, and it was this big spinning ball that he used color palette animation. And it was a full screen ball, and I had this idea in the back of my mind, having done graphics at Hewlett-Packard and been going to SIGGRAPH for many years, and knowing the capabilities of the Amiga, I thought, I think I can do something with that. And so prior to going to CES, I'd already taken Sam's original source code and shrunk the ball down and said, you know what, if I just change the bit plane pointers, I think I can make it bounce. So, when you first do that, you actually get 2 balls bouncing up and down because you need to have extra space for that. But anyway, so I started working on that prior to CES. I continued working on that at CES. RJ was working on some of his own demos, and by, I think, early Thursday morning, which is the last day the exhibits are open, is that right? Probably about 4 o'clock in the morning, and there's actually a lot of stories about RJ and me at CES working. And I finally got a bouncing ball, but it was just bouncing up and down. And I like bouncing because I was like a physics major for a while. And but there was no left or right. It was just bouncing up and down, and there was no audio. But the key thing is I could do something with the play fields, and I could cast a shadow using some tricks in the bit plane pointer. So I drew a mesh and have it cast a shadow, and it bounced up and down, and I was like, okay, I'm done. So I fell asleep about 4 o'clock in the morning, and the rest of the Amiga guys, the execs showed up at probably 8 o'clock in the morning to open up the show, and they all looked at it, and they woke us up, and they said, wow, now we need to go back and get everyone that we've already showed the Amiga to, and we need to bring them back to show this new demo.
It was incredible, though, because obviously the Amiga's got screens, and you could drag the Boing Ball demo down and see the workbench behind it. I mean, that reaction, when people saw that, did that blow their minds about then?
But that was, okay, so...
Multitasking.
Okay, so we had just gotten this set of hardware to start working on in December, 3 or 4 weeks before the January show. And we had been writing a lot of software, doing a lot of emulations. I wrote a Blitter emulator because I had no Blitter hardware. I wrote a Blitter emulator so that I could write code to poke the registers for the Blitter, and then when Agnes was ready to be plugged in, then I could just take my Blitter emulator out and plug in the real routine that would then poke the Blitter registers.
Dale did actually more than just write a Blitter emulator. He noticed in the Blitter emulator there was a feature missing that was easy to add. So he actually, at the last moment, threw in a critical piece of the hardware as the Bresnahan line drawing algorithm. So he was not only a software engineer, but he was, for a week or two, part of the hardware team.
Well, there's a whole other story. So, all right, so a week or so before, I think 2 weeks before CES, because it took a while, I said, I could change my Blitter emulator with a few lines of code and make it draw lines. And there's really not much change to the whole Blitter. It's just, if you're in this mode, do this instead of that. And implement the Bresnahan line draw algorithm. And everyone said it was too late. We're going to screw our schedule. And probably everyone, I think the entire company was against doing it, but I've been doing graphics software for a long time. And so they told Jay, you got to convince Dale that we're not going to do it. So he said, Dale, let's go out to lunch. And we went out to Denny's, and he said, okay, Dale, explain to me what you really want to do. And so I had brought all my stuff along, my software emulator, and said, this is all we really need to do. And he looked at it, and then when we came back, he said, I think we should do a line draw. and so I think I made a few enemies for a while until they got the hardware line draw working. And so they modified the Agnes chip and the Agnes stack to do the hardware line draw. And I think they probably got it done maybe only after 3 or 4 days, because the changes were very minimal.
Yeah, I was the one originally against that, but then Dave Needle came over and convinced me this is how many extra ICs I would have to add to the emulator to do it, and that finally convinced me.
Let me give you some more color about CES. For those that don't know, CES, Consumer Electronics Show, right? So in January, this is always in Vegas, people float out their ideas for the most extravagant, extraordinary demos of everything that they're going to launch that year. And then in June, CES, that one's in Chicago, that's when they take the orders, because that's the Tickle Me Elmo thing for Christmas that year. So the whole cycle is a 12-month thing, from showing the awesome demos to okay, now I got 6 months to actually build it.
And the awesome demos are really, a lot of it is smoke and mirrors. This
Absolutely.
This is what we'd like you to believe we can do.
It's total smoke and mirrors. And we're all, I had to explain to my family how, no, I'm sorry, CES is like the first or second week in January. I'm missing Christmas because I'm working 24 hours a day to get the demo for CES done. And so I'm kind of glad not to ruin my Christmases from now on.
And then at Commodore, we all worked the booths. They brought out the engineers, the accountant department, the marketing department. Everybody went out there.
It was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
But it meant that we were kind of busy for Christmas.
It was kind of busy for Christmas. And then I think it was in March, the big show was in Europe, the Hanover Messe, right?
CeBIT, right.
CeBIT, right. And so there was a permanent Commodore booth in Hanover, Germany. It was like a campus of 12 or so buildings the size of CES. And in Building 1, Hall 1, was the Commodore booth, double-decker, and so after we got done with CES, a lot of the people had to go to Germany to support all the, smoke and mirrors in Germany, because that was the next computer for Europe as well.
So, Jeff, you happen to be sitting right next to me. You mentioned in your intro that you're responsible for the A500, and what that was a cost-reduced version of the A1000, right? And we can get back to exactly what you did to cost-reduce that. But another thing you cost-reduced was the CDTV, and I found that one more interesting. So the CDTV, if you don't know what it was an Amiga that was meant to go in the living room. It was in a black thing like a stereo component. And Jeff, you worked to cost reduce that. What was involved in that?
Headley and I were pretty key in that. We did a little. The first CDTV was done by a guy by the name of Don Gelbreth. He'll be here tomorrow, I think.
Yep.
And so he'll tell you all the stories about building that in Japan. And it was kind of a skunkworks project outside of the engineering department. And by the time he got done, it was like costing 3 arms and 2 legs. So who is the guy that, you know, made an A500 sell for about $500? Me. What did the A1000 cost? About $1,200. So the number of the model was a hint at how much it should cost for that computer. Okay, and it's so I got called up to New York. Irving's office. Irving Gould was the chairman. He was this old Canadian. You know, Monday and Tuesday he was in New York. Wednesday and Thursday he was in Toronto. He was a Canadian citizen, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, he was in the Bahamas because he never wanted to pay taxes in the U.S. So if you spent more than 2 days a week in the U.S., you had to pay taxes in the U.S. So very important. If you ever get to that position, you need to know the rules about paying taxes in the U.S. But anyways, so Jeff, what can you do to cost through this computer? Go in that room over there. You've got an hour. Come back. Tell us what you can do. Great. Okay, so Don, explain what you've done here. Blah, 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 blah. Oh my God, you paid $400 for that CD-ROM drive? Oh my God. How am I ever going to get the cost down for this? So Headley and I did a tour of the world, and we went to all the places that invented the CD-ROM. So where's the first place you go for the inventor of the CD-ROM? Sony in Japan. And so I said, all right, I need a cheaper CD-ROM than this SCSI-based thing with a caddy that was like totally awkward. So they said, okay, here, 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 and here. I said, no. I want the one that you push the button, and a little drawer pops out. And then you just drop the disc in, and you push it again, it goes, that one. He said, well, that's an audio device. And I said, it's a CD. There's data on a CD. I don't care whether it's audio or computer data. So I said, that's the one I want right there. That's it. How much does that cost? $15. Oh. Yes, sir. Now, and then they said, unfortunately, all the documentation is Japanese. So Commodore Japan, bless their heart, translated their entire technical documents on this $15 CD drive. And I said, Headley, we don't really speak Japanese. We're going to have to insert somebody in Japan to be our gurus of this. So Chinon used to make the floppy drives for the Amiga and for the C64, and have been doing it for Commodore for years and years and years. And so I went to them and I said, I need you to make an interface here. Headley came up with this awesome idea to come up with an IDE interface for a CD-ROM drive, which, by the way, is the IDE interface that everybody knows today for the CD-ROM drive. Thank you very much. I'm not sure why we didn't get more money for that. And we had a $15 CD-ROM drive on a cost-reduced CDTV.
So which never actually was released.
We made 100 of them.
So I have a little follow-up.
They had an awesome vacuum fluorescent display on them.
I have a follow-up on that, which unfortunately I had it sitting on my desk and was going to bring it with me, but I was had too much stuff already, so I didn't bring it.
I disagree. You brought just the right amount.
Okay. So I have a CDTV CR that is complete without a case. I never had a case with it. I did the IDE software for it. You had a little RAM expansion you could drop in there, which had an IDE interface on it, so you could put a hard drive in it. And one thing that Headley and Jeff and so forth also did when they cost reduced it, the new version of it was basically an A600, even to the point where the ROM inside of it is actually an A600 ROM. I was missing the ROM, and I had Beth Richards take hers apart, which is broken at the moment, but she took it apart. I wanted to get a copy of the ROM from her, and she took it apart and said, I don't need to give you a copy and send me a picture. It's like the A600 ROM.
It is. It is.
And so it was basically an A600 with an 4510, which was also the chip used in the C65, which is sitting in that box there, which was used to control the CD-ROM.
It was Commodore's first surface mount product.
Right. Yeah. And it was very nice and clean.
It was very nice. Anyways,
Yeah.
okay.
So-
There's one other story about mega cost reduction. In the original A1000, you remember there was this kickstart thing, right? You had to like insert the disk, and then it would load the kickstart thing, so then it would boot into Amiga DOS and stuff like that. So the first A1000s had a little daughter board that had, I don't know what kind of
Big daughter board.
big daughter board. It was about yay big, full of static RAM that got loaded. You don't want to know how much it cost to make that. So when the A500 came around, I found these 16-bit wide masked ROMs in plastic that Nintendo was using for their gaming cartridges in their game machines. And I said, that's perfect. That $5 chip will hold the entire kickstart. Boom. So I think we went from maybe $50 for that board to $5 for that mask ROM. And didn't you actually take a plane ride to deliver one of those ROMs, Randell?
When we launched the CD32,
Okay.
I had to go to help oversee the pre-production run over in Manila, and I took a stop in Tokyo to drop off a set of ROMs to get masked by Commodore Japan.
So I think it was one of the large semiconductor outfits in Japan was making these ROMs for Nintendo. So we had to literally hand carry the internet barely existed. So it's not like you just, let me email you that, or let me put that in the Dropbox and send it to you. No.
You send an engineer halfway around the world with a little box to hand over.
Here it is, in a little gold box.
You mentioned Kickstart, the Amiga's ROM. I'm interested, Andy, I mean, when Commodore took over Amiga, what kind of a state was Kickstart in at the time? And I know, wasn't the Amiga's operating system written in a language called BCPL, which I imagine that came with a bunch of problems?
The BCPL was just the DOS. Yeah. The DOS, the text user interface, the disk stuff, and that was in a BCPL by a company named Metacomco, and yep, there it is.
God.
It was kind of an awkward fit getting BCPL into the Amiga, but the original Chaos disk operating system just was not ready and was never going to be ready, as far as we could tell. So in a last-ditch effort, they got Metacomco, which was running on a 68,000, and shoehorned it in there. And there were a number of things that we could have done better with that, but we were kind of pressed for time.
And it worked.
And it worked, and somehow after Metacomco moved out of the picture, I ended up having to do all the BCPL work.
And
so
then
Randell saved me by converting it into C.
Yes. About 4 years later than that, I showed up at one of the bi-weekly meetings to say what I'd been doing for the last 2 weeks, and I decided to do a skunkworks project to get rid of all the BCPL code and replace it with C and assembler, and I had it up and running and booting, and that was my weekly statement for what
So that was on your 5 bullet points that you submitted for that week?
Yeah.
I had to use my surprise and shocked face because I actually knew what Randell was doing, but oh my God, how amazing!
Yeah,
and it was actually amazing. I mean, that was quite an effort.
And I never once ran the BCPL compiler.
So, Peter, I had a question for you, not to pick on you, but that's why we're here. One of the things you were instrumental in was when version 2 of the Amiga operating system came out, there were a ton of changes, a lot of visual changes to it. Went from the blue and orange that I technically prefer, no offense. But what was a lot of your work on that? What all went into that?
So when I started, 1.4 was about to reach beta. It wasn't quite a beta. That was a long process. The day I got there, I looked at all the cool stuff that was done and said, you guys ought to call this 2.0. And I said, no. Everyone said, we all agreed that 2.0 was a release where we get to break everybody. Little did we know, because 2.0 ended up, so they did pick the 2.0 name eventually, and it did break a lot of software. That being said, it was still the blue and orange, white, and everything. But the project I had done that I'd shown to Carolyn Shepner and Gail Wellington at World of Amiga in Toronto was a file requester library that I was developing. And it was too big, and Carolyn said, well, we've already licensed one for the next operating system, but we'd like you to send your resume. But it had very carefully styled buttons and scrollers, and I don't know if you think people that had used the Amiga back in those days, scroll bars and sliders were a real mess. Like the raw component to move a box and a track was there, but the implementations were all over the place in terms of how big the knob is, where does it snap to. Things were very inconsistent. And I had kind of refined all that behavior, so Andy said, I want you to build on that and help us rebuild the preferences tools using those components. So the components ultimately became the gadget toolkit, which is a big part of the button look and feel of the software. But at the same time, like the next computer had shipped in October of '88, I think, and that was kind of influential. And one day, I came into work at my normal time was about 10 o'clock, and Dave Berezowski, who was he had a C64 background as well, but he was responsible for Workbench, and Steve Beats, who was doing file system drivers and stuff like that, were sitting there, and they had this smug look on their face. I'm like, what's up, guys? And they're like, we're going to wait till everyone else is here. Okay. So slowly people trickle in, Bryce comes in, Randell comes in, eventually everyone's there, and they finally gathered us all around, and they had basically recolored Workbench with the gray, black, and white scheme that we ultimately, pretty close to the exact colors we ended up with, and had done a little bit of light treatment with the window borders. So that was the genesis of the look, was an all-nighter that the two of them had pulled. So whether that was inspired by the button work I did or next or whatever combination, things were starting to really steamroll. And then, so we basically ran with that. And so between that initiative, I did a lot of the work with getting the window gadgets looking right and perfecting the rendering. Like, it's not just the shapes are different, but if you notice in 2.0, the rendering is very clean. There's no flickering and flashing of any of the elements. We went through that. I made a version of Intuition which had like pauses after every step of the rendering to make sure that we weren't overdrawing pixels. You don't want to resize the window and have the pixels be painted gray and then white and then black and then finally back to gray. So everything is tack sharp because of all the work that we did, and all the behaviors with the scroll bars became standard. And then like no application developer had an excuse anymore. They were hard to tame, but you had a model. You could either use it if you wanted to use the toolkit, or you could say, oh, I still want to build my own, but at least I'll make it work as well as that. So we did all that, and then there was an agreement that we were going to have a sans serif font. We still had the old Topaz in there, and then Kodiak Burns in California, kind of to force the issue, picked a slightly ugly sans serif font nobody wanted, and he put it in the system to kind of force the issue into the open. And I think there are some 1.4 betas that showcase that font. And then, I don't know if you brought it to me or I brought it to you, but we found a font floating around on the not internet at the time that was derived from Topaz, and you said, it's Topaz, we own it. So it was Topaz with most of the serifs removed. So I went and cleaned it all up and fixed a bunch of the letters, and the lowercase L to make it not look like a vertical bar, and I has a little curl at the bottom, and that was very contentious. A lot of people thought that was wrong. I was very insistent because I wanted it to be distinctive for legibility. Turns out it's a big contribution to the personality of the new font as well. I didn't appreciate that at the time. I was just there for the practical reason of making it look good. And then I fired up the crude font editors of the day and shaved off all the serifs off the other sizes of Topaz. And that's the font that we have. And I guess my big regret is we didn't get the new look menus in time for 2.0. So the menus are still black on a theme where they should have been white. So there were challenges getting those to be software compatible with application software. We finally got around to do that for 3.0.
Just to give you a little more clarity here, this is not a large team of engineers that are doing this. We had maybe 50 guys for chip design, software design, hardware design, mechanical design, QA,
Layout.
This was lean and mean.
In 88, 89, 90, which was probably the largest in terms of the number of
20
people.
people, yeah.
About-
20 software guys.
20 software guys total for everything.
Yeah.
Why so many? The original chips were done with 4 or 5 brilliant engineers,
well,
3 or 4 brilliant software
I
people.
guess you guys were just that much more brilliant.
Jeff, I did have a follow-up question for
wanted
you.
to
You
sleep.
mentioned mechanical design. Who did the mechanical design of the A1000?
So A1000, I'm not sure. Los Gatos guys, do you know who did that? For the A500, the industrial design, which is how it looks, was done by this guy out of Commodore Japan, Ito-san. And Ito, I have somewhere in my basement, and I should have brought it because it's awesome. It's a charcoal rendering of how the A500 was going to look before anybody made one, ever. And when I got the first plastic, like 6 months later, off the tooling that was done in Taiwan, it looked exactly the same as Ito's drawing. It was incredible. So it was like, we had some mechanical engineers in Westchester, Pennsylvania, Herb Mosteller and his crew that would go through and they'd take the literal charcoal painting of Ito and do mechanical drawings and then give that to a tooling guy so that they would make a plastic injection molded tool out of that. And then if everything worked out, cross your fingers, you got a sample back. And it's like, yes, it worked.
Yeah, we had a fellow, Rob Jamel, who was in, worked for Rick Geiger and Commodore Amiga in Los Gatos. He had done, and if you actually look at I think 2 years ago at the VCF, I did I did an exhibit of the Zorro 2 cards and the bringing out of the auto config and the getting rid of the dip switches. But during that time I was doing that, I found Rob Jamel, who was still in California, and he had a bunch of his old artwork. And I'm sure that there's some of his stuff is now on the internet because we posted it. And so it's like, boy, that looks a lot like an A500 because he was actually doing he actually was tasked to do some mock-ups for Ranger, or Los Gatos Ranger. And so you'll find pictures like that on the internet.
Ranger was a follow-up system that didn't get made, is that right?
Ranger was the Los Gatos kind of A2000. And it was going to have card slots, and the form factor of the plug-in cards was squarish, whereas the 2000 was more like PC.
Right. It was pretty contentious when, I suggested we make an Amiga that looked sort of like a overgrown Commodore 64. It was like, guys, I know how to do this. It's a keyboard, it's a piece of plastic, it's a brick power supply. It's going to be really cheap. Trust me.
And you're going to sell it at Kmart.
Yes. Yes.
And you did.
And I mean, it worked, right? That's what sales
sold
really
lots.
took off.
We sold 4 million, so I guess it worked.
I've got a question about, this is for Glenn. Obviously, the Amiga's audio is legendary, the Paula chip. Walking around here today, hearing some of the audio still sounds incredible today. I mean, what were the aims of the Paula chip? What did you want to achieve in designing that?
Well, we wanted it to sound better than what was out there. Can you hear?
Nice and close.
Yeah, but we didn't expect it to come out nearly as good as it did. We had a first one was called Porsche, and it had 8-bit outputs and 4 channels. And then at some point, I came up with this crazy idea that we could get 14-bit dynamic range if we just did a pulse modulation of the thing. This was much earlier than the line draw and much bigger change, but I talked to Jay about it, and he said, well, build another breadboard. So we built a second breadboard with this idea in it, and also improvements in the disk controller that would make it less sensitive to error flickers in the data. And that's what got made in the end.
Polar also did more than just audio, didn't it? It did disk control too.
Oh, it was the peripherals, all the leftover stuff after the. I was the junior chip designer, right? All the fancy video stuff and everything.
Right, yeah. Hold it closer.
Oh yeah, all the fancy video stuff was done by the other people. This was the POTS, the disk controller, the audio,
All the leftover bits.
a couple of other GPIOs. Oh yeah, there was a UART on it, serial link. It's there somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, it came out pretty good. And one of the things, I don't know, I think I thought this at the time. One of the things I was always worried about on CDs was this brick wall filter theory. That brick wall was an ideal filter, and it's like, I'm not sure if that's right. So we had a relatively slow second-order salt and key roll-off for the output, because otherwise you would get horrible aliasing. Because it wasn't really sampling all that fast.
I remember you had the audio filter on the Amiga, and that turned the power LED off, didn't it, when it was bypassed? I remember first time I saw that, I thought, why has my machine just turned itself off? I think you changed that to just dimming the LED later on instead.
Oh, yeah, because some people, you can sometimes use the aliasing. If you're just doing it randomly, then the aliasing is horrible. But if you're really careful about what frequencies you use and make sure that they line up with the color burst just right, you can make it sound incredible because you avoid the aliasing by making things just the right frequency. So people did that, and I was like, who thought of that? That's pretty cool.
Or if you want to control laser displays,
There you go.
they got rid of the filters. They wanted DC out.
Oh, I didn't even know that one.
So, Randall, I have one for you. So we all, the Amiga was just an amazing computer, but we know how it turned out. Commodore went bankrupt. That was the end of it. Something that you did, I think it was 91, but correct me if I'm wrong, you wrote your blue sky proposal to save the Amiga. I don't expect you to go through the whole thing here. If you want to read it, it's been scanned. It's on the Internet Archive. You can search for Randall's name. What was the purpose behind that? Who was the audience? Who actually read it? Like, did anyone in management read it, and did they care?
Well, so I won't go into all the details of it, but basically there were a couple of things I wrote about, where we could go forward and improvements. There were at least two different memos, but one of them was it could be a AA Christmas memo and so forth. I went through a bunch of iterations on this memo and passed it by. Various people have passed it by, I think Headley, Dave Haney, and other people. Eventually, I passed it up to Jeff when I was all done. And from there, I don't know how high it went. I don't know how politically motivated, received it was to be. It did not actually come to pass.
So here's the deal.
This is why I asked, because you were sitting right next to me. It was perfect.
Okay, so remember I told you about the CES life cycle of consumer electronics? The smoke and mirrors happens in January. You take orders in June. You build it by September, so it's on the shelf in October, November, December, and you pray to God you did the Tickle Me Elmo for that Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is,
It was too late.
electronics consumer electronics 101. They call it Black Friday for a reason, right? So Mehdi Ali, who was the president of the company, had done a big favor to Irving Gould, the chairman of the company, to get a bunch of money to hold us over because we spent $55 million for the Amiga, bringing the Amiga to market, and we sold a whopping 77,000 of them. And we needed something quick. So we did the A500, great. poof, we, sold 4 million of those over the years. So great, we survived that. Mehdi Ali, still in charge. Okay, now the finance guy believes he knows everything about marketing, everything about sales, everything about engineering, technology, science, invention, blah, blah, blah. Nothing could be further from the truth. So we're in the middle of designing the A1200.
Yep.
It's an awesome computer, by
And
the
the
way.
A4000.
Amazing computer, by the way. He introduces it. His pipeline is full of A500s and A600s. He announces the product the day after Thanksgiving and can't deliver a single one. I said, dude, you just Osborne the company. What's Osborne?
Yeah.
Okay. So because you need to sell what you have, that's sales rule number one. Sell what you have. He built an inventory for Christmas of A500s and A600s beyond belief. They would have sold just fine. But because he told for only a few bucks more, you can have an A1200, no one wanted to buy a 500 or 600. It turns into Red Friday, not Black Friday. Okay? He did it again the second Christmas. End of story.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Amiga 600 there, which was a curious machine. I mean, it was essentially a smaller A500 Plus. What was
It was supposed to
remember
be.
what I said about the number of the number of the Amiga is how much it should cost? It was originally called the A300.
Yeah. And in fact, I sent you I think I sent you the manual. It's a printed manual that says A300.
Yeah, that is also scanned in on Internet Archive.
So
Thank you, Randall.
Mehdi hired a guy that brought the world the PC Junior. How many people remember the PC Junior? Oh my God, you all remember the
that
PC
infrared
Junior.
keyboard? I remember that.
With the chiclet keyboard. Okay.
Lou Agerbrecht.
Yeah. So his claim to, they basically, being Commodore, you heard from Al Charpentier in the Sonic thing, when you're a Commodore, all you want to do is cost reduce. You become a really good guy at cost reducing. I'm pretty good at that. And they wanted something cheaper than what Jeff Porter could do for a cost on an A500. Go ahead, buddy, try. So they hired Bill Sidneys because he said, I can cut that cost by half. Name that tune. Name that tune. Couldn't be done. So they basically, had to change the model number on the computer because it cost more than an A500 by the time he was done with it.
This
And
is
they
actually
did-
a Commodore tradition. The Plus 4 was originally supposed to be cheaper than the Commodore 64. And it was not.
It was not. So you need to be careful about that.
When-
I remember Greg Berlin's over here, one of my hardware guys from the days. He had an office right next to Dave. Dave's on the panel tomorrow. But he used to get really pissed off at me that I could predict the cost of a computer before he was done with the schematic.
When we switched it from the A300 to the A600, we did actually add some more RAM because they were trying to keep the RAM down to keep the cost down.
Yeah.
And since they couldn't keep the cost down,
They might as well throw a little bit extra RAM in.
Get IDE on board as well, I remember, didn't it? Was that a late addition too?
the IDE cost nothing. It was like a couple of gates, really, and a connector.
Pins were a limiting factor. We had 84-pin PLCCs. Those were,
Yeah.
we're up to 84 pins.
Yeah, but IDE was just so simple as an interface. It was like a few resistors, capacitors, a connector. It was like nothing.
So I don't know if I'm being professionally trolled here. So Mark Rifkin, I don't know if you're here, Mark. He sent me, Mark, you were awesome. You sent me a bunch of really great and really obscure questions. And when I was reading them, I was like, what if he's just making these up? Like maybe this stuff didn't even happen. But the one for Jeff, I just had to ask you. It was there's really two on here, but I'll start with the time you had to take the Concorde to get to a meeting with Mehdi and Irving.
Oh, gosh. I think this was around the A3000 time. And Mehdi decided to hire Philippe Starck. I'm sure no one knows who Philippe Starck is in this audience. Oh, famous French designer, right? He designs toothbrushes and, you know, restrooms in New York City that you don't know where to pee. You actually pee onto the mirror. It's really strange. And I believe that hotel still exists. So anyways, Philippe Starck, famous industrial designer, you know, he, French, you can guess by the name. So the first meeting of Philippe Starck was in Westchester. Philippe meets Jeff, and, you know, he said, you know, we've hired Philippe. He's going to design the case of the A3000 because it's going to look awesome. And so he came with his original concepts, which had Mickey Mouse ears on a bulbous screen. And it had one floppy drive on this side going that way and another floppy drive going on this way. And his first question to me was, you know, there's too many keys on this keyboard. We have to do something about this. So my guy said, Jeff, you have the patience of Job. But I said, okay, Philippe, here we go. Here's a raw keyboard. Here's a raw motherboard. Here's a raw hard drive. Here's a raw power supply. You have to fit that inside somehow. And you can't just move the keys around. I know you did in Paris. I know you did in France because it's QWERTY instead of ASCII. FDSA, Q, I don't know, I can't even, whatever. It's Azerte, that's it. But you have to fit it in the box. I have to be able to build it. I said this Mickey Mouse ear speakers on the bulbous monitor. I can't even build that in plastic. The injection mold, I couldn't do it. So I said, you have to like, these are the things that have to go inside. So anyways, he went off, second meeting in Paris. Fine, okay, here we go again. So he like, and it's like, we're pretty much almost at the same spot. He conceded on the keyboard. So we had another meeting to give me some renderings and drawings and blah, 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 and here we go. And, you know, I need to be back in Westchester. Oh, there's a Concorde that leaves blah, blah, blah. It only costs $500 more than my business class ticket that I have. I'm going for it, blah, blah, blah. So I get to Heathrow on the, ready to board the plane, and the lovely British Airways lady comes on and says, you know, due to the turbulence, we won't be able to have service on our plane today, but we'll be in New York in no time flat, so just grab a biscuit and jump on. And so we went, so it's great. Okay, it's really windy. I'm about to get in a plane that goes Mach 2. No, it's at 40,000 feet. The wind's a lot different up there. So I get on the plane. It's, you know, there's only 100 seats on a Concorde, and when you're 6'3", your head touches the ceiling. So you're doing this. There's only 2 seats on each side. So I like, you know, make it on the Concorde. We get almost to New York City. We're circling JFK, circling, and all of a sudden you can see on the altimeter, it's going up and up and up. Captain comes on board and says, we're going to have to divert. We're past the noise abatement curfew for the Concorde at JFK. We cannot land in JFK tonight. We're going to Montreal. Peter knows about Montreal. He grew up in Montreal. The lovely Mirabel Airport that we're only disturbing the moose or something like that.
For those of you who don't know, it was built about an hour and a bit north of Montreal. They had the plan to build 6 terminals because they had this hockey stick graph of what airplane traffic would be like.
Of course.
And anyway, it's closed now, or maybe it's used for cargo. The official logo of the airport was a white elephant in there.
Yes. So that's where the Concorde landed that day. And I
Far
took,
enough from civilization.
Yeah,
there were
and
no
I
noise concerns.
Yeah, and I took the normal flight home that I would have taken, but I never got my $500 back. So, anyways, that's the Concorde story.
Well done, thank you.
We're going to give you guys a chance to ask some questions soon as well. Before we do that, I mean, tomorrow we've got another Amiga panel as well. I'm sure Dave Haney will talk more about the future plans for the Amiga as Commodore was going under. But I mean, I know, Randell, you've got a schematic, a blueprint of one of the unreleased AAA chips there at the front of the stage. I mean, might be
Designed
interesting
by
to
Glenn.
hear a bit about kind of what the plans were as a company went under. What was kind of meant to be next?
Well, I mean, we'd been working on the AAA chips since, like 88, I don't know, right around the time I joined. And we had finally, in the last few months before everything went poof, and we had no money for anything, and half the people were gone, we actually got to the point where we had AAA systems booting, kind of. They didn't have a working interrupt, which was a small problem. But I was writing test software for the Blitter on AAA, and I was able to get the serial port to work without interrupts by doing some interesting shenanigans, so I could get my data in and out. And I think they had some graphics stuff up and running on them and so forth. The boards now, I think someone in the UK has the last working boards. And I was also working with Glenn here on Mary, because I was the one who was doing all the floppy software stuff. And so we were collaborating a bit on that. And it had really awesome audio and it had really fancy floppy support, though floppies were on their way out at the time. It even had some support to directly drive CD-ROMs. Well, at least in theory it did, through the same hardware that was used for the floppy, I think. So.
I remember one of the fun things on this was...
Microphone.
Oh, I remember one of the fun things on this was...
He doesn't get out much.
Yeah, good point. I couldn't test this was designed to cover more of the different codes, different kinds of codes that you could have in a disk controller that would pack more data in the thing. One I remember is called RLL27, but I couldn't run the actual simulation of the chip, so I actually wrote the whole thing in C and tested it that way. And I found that there were some bugs in the sync code, so that you could actually have a sync code in a CD in regular data. That was an interesting discovery. Anyway, it was fun.
So we wanted to save 10 minutes for questions, and we have just about 10 minutes left.
Feel free to go a little over. We got up till about 4:50.
Oh.
If we want to stretch it.
I got one little story about MPEG way
yeah.
back.
Was this the,
That was
the
probably-
Bon Jovi story?
Oh,
That's a different one.
yeah, that's
That was
probably
another one Mark gifted me. But again, I'm looking
that's
at it,
probably
I'm like,
good.
Jeff never even heard of Bon Jovi. This is a fake.
So no, it's that was the first MPEG video that we had playing on the Amiga. So it was I found this company in California called C-Cube that made this awesome,
Yep.
MPEG decoder chip, and we figured out how to basically genlock it to the Amiga so that you could, play back video without having, a NewTek video toaster connected to your Amiga with, tape machines and video discs and all this other. Digital video was still really new back then.
Yeah. MPEG-1.
MPEG-1. So I got myself somehow invited to be on the MPEG-1 ANSI ISO committee with Philips, who was doing all these CDI-based things, and they were paying some big bucks to some movie theaters for, movie rights on 5-inch round shiny things. And we made, with the C-Cube chip, I think I still have a C32 with an MPEG decoder at home.
I have one of those.
And we could play the Philips movies on a CD32. So we didn't, you know, fine, go get your movies from the Philips guys and play them on your Amiga.
Yep. Yeah. There was also an add-on for the A500, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was also done using it. You and I went out to California to meet with the C-Cube guys.
Yeah.
And LSI, I think. And
But
yeah.
that Bon Jovi video was like the first. That was the boing ball for MPEG videos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Seal as well.
Yeah, Seal. I had some buddies at. I remember going to talking to Warner Custom Music because I wanted to license some more stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And I showed up with my demo of a 5-inch round shiny thing with a movie on it. And I said, gentlemen, this is the future of movies. And they looked at me that said, Jeff, do you understand I just paid I don't know how many millions of dollars to build a VHS duplicating plant in Scranton, Pennsylvania? Get out of my face. And I said, didn't you have this problem with cassettes and CDs? Yeah. Okay, so it was, we did manage to license a couple songs from them for demo purposes and things like that. And they eventually came around, and I'm not sure what that plant is like in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but maybe, you know, they'll be doing something else with that plant these days.
Yeah, and we also had Darren Greenwald implement CD plus G to do, so you could have a CD, audio CD with graphics sort of.
Okay, that was before you could have movies.
Yes,
Yeah.
and right, and
it was
now
karaoke.
the CD
mostly
plus
karaoke.
G is still used for karaoke.
It is.
The last thing, though, no one seems to have noticed, but when the Chinese bought the Amiga as one of the many purchasers, they actually cared a lot about karaoke CDs. And no one seems to have noticed before this that the mouth movements and the video did not match using our MPEG card. So it took me like a month to get that working.
We thank you.
I have no idea that it was so important to them, but
Andy, if you don't mind, just kind of a fun thing. You are sort of known for bringing humorous T-shirts that you can tell a story with shirts. So either you have your dirty laundry there,
No,
or
actually-
you might have been prepared for that.
I didn't. I only brought 2 T-shirts. One because I thought this goes with Jeff's story about
Bayern München.
right CBIT and a CDTV shirt since. But I really wasn't prepared.
So at the Hanover show every year, they would trot out the Bayern München Fußball Club club bus to drive the folks that ran the booth, the employees that were staffing the booth, and it was pretty cool to get like a, you know, Bayern München Fußball Club bus ride to the fair every day.
Well, we have got a few minutes for a Q&A. We've got a wireless mic doing the rounds. Just put your hand up if you have a question. We'll start with David.
Yes, hello, guys. The question I want to ask is that, you know, being within Commodore on the other side of the pond, we were desperately waiting for advancements in the technology, AAA and AGA. Considering how well you guys did with Amiga and developing it with a small number of people, why did it take so long to actually get a AAA or an AGA even close to market? It took, for some reason, did they starve you of funds, or what was the reason behind that?
It was mostly the CES cycle and MEDI not having any long-term ability to understand what it takes to do this stuff. I mean, most of the time it takes 9 months to create something from start to finish, quickest. And putting 2 men on the job doesn't make it go any faster.
It was a pregnant pause, in other words, not months. Yeah.
So it's difficult, and especially when you've got custom chips. Look at what these guys did. How, you know, you'll spend a year doing this kind of stuff to get your first custom chips, right?
Yeah, but wasn't the AAA started in '88 or
Yeah,
AAA
took a while, and there were various reasons for that I'm not particularly knowledgeable about. But
I mean, things are silicon design technology is a lot better these days.
Oh yeah, the tools weren't there.
When we did these, we didn't have access to silicon design software to do this. So these were gate level simulations of what the chips are supposed to do. So these, if you look at the schematics for the chips, these are faithful representations of what those gates were. These aren't functional simulations, these are gate level simulations.
And the gates
They could have been a
were-
lot smaller if they had been
Correct.
like functional simulations.
But now you have, these massive programmable arrays that you just do software and you push download and a chip comes out.
Right,
Yeah, the,
exactly.
the original design of this chip was done in colored pencil on ruby lith. That was our design tool methodology.
Yeah.
No,
What was
no, no modern tools.
What was interesting was that AAA was taking a while. I wasn't that close to it, so I can't comment on the reasons, but the teams were small, so individuals could make a difference. And a gentleman named Bob Rabel in the chip group said, I think I can do a turn on that's based on the ECS architecture that brings us to the next level, and that became the AA project. And that came together really fast. And so AAA stood for Advanced Amiga Architecture, and AA stood for less than AAA. It didn't have a meaning. And marketing eventually called it AGA, but and that came together. It seemed extraordinarily fast.
That came together in like 6 months, I'd say. Yeah. It was fast.
What did you want to add, Dave?
I was just going to say, when Bob Riedel started it, he was calling it Pandora.
Right, Pandora.
That kind of went away as soon as anybody else knew about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the two chips were Alice and Lisa, which were Bob's daughters, and my wife actually babysat Alice and Lisa.
Another question.
Another question, yeah?
Okay, this is probably out of left field, but was it possible, necessary, or just even desirable to defrag an Amiga hard drive? And I ask because I had a friend who had a software.
It was absolutely possible, having worked on hard drive stuff there. It was not, we probably did a better job of keeping things defragged to begin with into the allocation strategies. But the data could get scattered across the disk if you were in a tight levels. So absolutely possible, and would be definitely helpful if it was fragmented. We tried to keep it as unfragmented as possible as we were going along.
Thank you.
Another question over there at the back?
From the cheap seats.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, could you guys tell us a little bit about how things were in the company both before and after Thomas Radigan with his departure as the CEO?
So Tom Radigan came from Pepsi. Okay, knows how to sell cigarette. He knows how to sell. But I can remember a meeting with RJ and maybe Dale and Glenn were there.
Just like Scully and Apple.
Yeah, it's just like Scully and Apple. It's they had a very strategic, high-level meeting with the engineers, with Tom Radigan and the higher mucky mucks, and said, "Oh, there's this guy by the name of Marshall Smith that was there." Yeah, he was right at the launch of the Amiga, and so Radigan puts his feet up on the table of the boardroom and says, I don't know, Marsh, what do you think? What's the most important thing that these engineers should be working on? And they turned around and they said, I think the cost-reduced 128 would be good. And I just went, do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who you're talking to? The brain trust of the Amiga, and you just told them that the C128 cost reduced was the most important thing. So it's like, yee. So there was a disconnect there. He didn't last too long. And then they brought in a bunch of Apple guys. Oh, they at least know computers. So now we have Frank Leonardi and what's the guy's name of the U.S. sales company? Harry Copperman, yeah? So I remember Frank did one of these. Jeff, I had this little chat with Steve, and let me tell you, I know exactly how to sell us. We're going to put it in, these Apple computer stores, and we're going to sell a lot of these. And I said, and we're going to mark the price up a lot. And it's like, Frank, it's a $500 game machine with a keyboard on it. We don't want to sell it for $1,500. We tried that once with the A1000. I said, we need to sell it in Toys R Us and, places like that. So anyways, that was a struggle. That was a struggle. The first guys in sales and marketing from the Commodore 64 heyday were all, selling stuff to Sears and places like that, mass merchandisers, right? So they knew that channel. And I remember going on a couple, dog and pony shows to the Sears Tower at Christmas, because they had to decide by February whether the Amiga 500 was going to be in the Sears catalog for the following Christmas or not. And so it was right after, this must have been, A500 was first shown in January of '87, CES. Little bit less smoke, little bit less mirrors. It was actually working. First plastic, first boards, first everything, running, Defender of the Crown like a charm. And it was, so it's the middle of winter in Chicago. I'm schlepping a 1084 monitor and an Amiga 500 through the snow up to the top level of the Sears Tower in Chicago. And it's like, we're showing, I'm doing the demo for them and let the sales guys clean it up. All right, you take the order, I'll do the demo. Here we go. And the guy, Marv Jerso, wow, I'm pulling all these names out of my brain. The head buyer for Sears said, Jeff, we could sell you 1 million of these if we could only clone you and, put one of you in every store. Shit. So I learned a lesson. You shouldn't put your head of engineering on a demo. You should have the salesman do the demo because, he's not an engineer, right? If he can do a demo and impress the buyer, that's probably a better idea. So that was a hard lesson learned.
Let's get another question.
We have another question down here.
I'm glad you mentioned Harry Copperman because we remember when he came on and a lot of stuff was coming out. You had Amiga Unix, you had the networking cards, you had the TCP IP, and we really believed at that time that they were going to go after the workstation market. And then he got promoted, and then nothing happened afterward. What was going on behind the scenes? Because we were lost.
Well, I mean, from these jackets that a few of us have from the A3000 launch that you were at in the Palladium in New York City, it was a great launch, but multimedia and computers this was a new thing. It's a real new thing. The video toaster was just getting its sea legs on the A2000 by then, and now all of a sudden we come up with an A3000. It's really new. So it's like, unfortunately, by that time, 90% of Commodore sales were in Europe, 90%. The U.S. market, because of the mistakes that they made with the 500, was decimated, unfortunately. So that's probably the thing behind the scenes.
We have time for a few more questions. Just put your hand up.
Sure. Yeah, I have a question here. In the TV miniseries *Halt and Catch Fire*, you saw the engineering and I guess the sales staff really just flat out burning their time and energy into creating these projects. How closely do you think your life experience in creating these cutting-edge products mirrored that? And how well did university prepare you for that?
So I remember when we were trying to ship 2.04, that myself and Bryce and probably Peter and some of the others, we had some cots in a spare room at Westchester that was full of old video games for some reason, like, big stand-up video games. And we would actually literally sleep on those cots trying to get 2.04 out, and the company would pay to like have meals brought in for us in the evenings. And we got lobster from someplace.
You had cots. We slept on the floor.
Well, the cots were shared.
That would have been luxury.
So, at times it was like that.
We were living the dream. We were all 20-something guys living the dream. We were building computers that we wanted for ourselves.
God, yeah.
It was our entire social life, the company,
It was.
work.
Yeah.
I mean, when we went to parties, it was like the same people we were working with.
Yeah.
And, the discussions, normal party talk, can we do that chip? How did that? It was all technical talk, so yeah.
I wouldn't have traded it for anything, but it was an amazing time in history, especially on the East Coast of the United States. Here for us, we had a fab in Norristown, Pennsylvania. It's a super fun site, by the way. I think you toured it the other day.
I was just there yesterday.
Okay. So you can take your own tour if you'd like, grab a souvenir of broken glass, and it was an amazing time. Yeah. We were running $1 billion garage shop, and there weren't a lot of marketing guys telling us what to do.
Yeah.
You had engineers, right, salesmen. We had bean counters and factories. That's it, right? So it was a really fun time.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Part of that is when we all started doing this engineering, we all came of age right when the microprocessor was brand new. And there were no senior people, or very few senior people, that were adept at managing or talking about microprocessors or knew what to do. So we were basically the technical experts. Yeah. And we could just run amok because nobody could tell us.
Well, you're right. But you needed to have somebody that, well, I guess that's my role, to explain to the uppers what we're doing. And then so long as it met their business model, it's like, okay, go ahead and do that. And then what's taking you so long? They show up next week. How come you said you can't do that? Remember the thing about 9 months making a baby? Okay.
Okay, let's get a couple more questions.
Yeah, question down here.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested in the CDTV and if it was in some way influenced by Philips CDI.
It was. I won't lie. It was. We had a way better chipset. We had a way better software development community. We had a way better user base. So everything about CDTV was going to be better. And we just needed a little more of a runway to let the CDTV CR cost reduce come out. And unfortunately, we didn't have that much runway.
Another one?
Okay, time for a couple more. If anyone wants to put their hand up.
Yeah, over here.
Yeah, over there. Over this way. Put your hand up again, please.
Well, reading the Brian Magnon books. I'm reading the Commodore history book.
It's on.
It's on.
Okay. Yeah. Hearing about the speed bumps and the resources being devoted to things that didn't matter versus things that mattered. Like if they hadn't, put all that into the speed bumps, how much better do you think the Amiga could have been?
Randell still has an original speed bump memo.
Yeah. That's one of the many bits of things that happened.
We have very inspired engineers, and they get inspired for doing amazing computer things, but they get inspired for doing other things too.
Yeah, the other things actually helped. I mean,
Yeah.
it made it more of a group effort.
Esprit de corps.
Speed bumps, security guards, and so on.
I wasn't faulting the engineers. I was just saying if the company supported the engineers as much as they supported the staff that enforced the...
Nah,
I think that was their effort in bringing us together. I mean,
Yeah.
without that stuff, we might have just been...
None of
failed the
that
bond.
really got in the way. The lack of resources, other things, stupid decisions, those got in the way.
Well, I think we are about out of time. So,
have any closing thoughts?
Yeah.
I guess I'd just like to say thank you we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for all of you. And it warms the cockle of my heart to go through all those rooms over there and like see all the stuff that people have done. So it really, you put a smile on my face, and I want to just say thanks to all of you.
Well, please give a big thank you to our panel.
Before everyone gets up, I want to take a picture.
Okay, it's picture time. Can we get it? Well, we got a video. Can we get somebody with an iPhone over there to like take a? We gotta take a.
And while you're looking,
I wanted pictures of you guys. So.
Yeah, we'll take a picture.
So at Amiga, we thought we were on a mission from God when we saw this, and for me at least, it was always supposed to be a full-blown computer with really great graphics.
Smile, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.